But we can see.
You mean
the questions
6?
start to.
Aloha, I'm Lisa Morrison, a teacher at Maui High School and the Hawaii State Teachers Association Secretary-Treasurer. Welcome to this live stream, during which we're excited to get an update from State House Finance Chair Sylvia Luke, who's here with us this afternoon. She's going to tell us about various teacher pay initiatives and other measures that will improve working conditions for teachers and learning conditions for the students we serve. First, I'd like to note that it's Teacher Appreciation Week, and we appreciate all of our members who go above and beyond, both in and out of the classroom for their students. A heartfelt mahalo to all of you, and we hope that you enjoy your Teacher Appreciation gift from HSTA. Representative Luke, what would you like to say to all the educators? I know you've benefited from public school since you were a student in Makiki as a little girl.
First of all, I want to thank HSTA and especially you, Lisa, for flying here from Maui to do this. I think there are a lot of people who are interested in what's happening at the legislature, so I want to thank every one of you for joining us. As Lisa mentioned, I actually came here when I was 9 years old from South Korea without being able to speak any English, and it was a public school teacher who took me aside and taught me English every day after school, and she spent so much hours just teaching me and spending so much time with me. And throughout my life, I think many teachers just had such an impact on me. When I was in middle school, I had this wonderful teacher, Lorraine Saari, who I spent weekends with, and I went to her house, and she was just a second mother figure to me. I was actually inspired by Mr. Obata, who made me want to get into genetics. Clearly, I didn't end up being a geneticist, but with that said, there's so many people who touch people's lives and touch kids and make kids become who they are today. So appreciation go out to each and every one of you. Mahalo.
Thank you. We're in the final days of this year's legislative session, and we're also very appreciative to Representative Luke for being with us today and for all her efforts to improve things for educators and students in public and charter schools across the state. We also have to thank State House Speaker Scott Saiki, House Education Chair Justin Woodson from my home island, and all of the state representatives who have been so supportive of all public schools. In the Senate, we say mahalo to Senate President Ron Kochi, Senate Ways and Means Chair Donovan Dela Cruz, and Senate Education Chair Michelle Kadani, among many other senators who have fought for more resources for public educators and schools. We have a number of key proposals that will affect students, educators, and all of us really to talk about today, and so we're going to jump right in a second. If you have questions you'd like us to answer, feel free to put them in the comments on our Facebook or YouTube channels. HSTA's President Osa Tui and Vice President Logan Okita will answer questions in the chat and comment areas, but Sylvia and I will also answer some of those questions live. We'd also like to welcome Corey Harvey, a third grade teacher at Kipapa Elementary who serves on HSTA's Government Relations Committee. Corey is with us here at HSTA and will ask your questions on behalf of you later in our program. If you'd like to learn more about some of the legislative proposals and bills we'll discuss today, go to our website for more information. You'll see the URL on the screen now and in the comments. For some reason, links to web stories and bills. So, Sylvia, let's start our conversation by talking about your efforts to combat salary compression, which has left many veteran teachers in the middle of the salary schedule without getting raises that recognize their years of experience. About 8,000 of our members have seen their pay frozen during tough times in years past, and they've never caught up. And so I know you were looking at fixing this back in early 2020, and then the pandemic intervened. Let's start there.
Yeah, so as a legislator, we've heard for years how compression interfered with the amount of pay that teachers receive. So we've been trying to address this for years. And in actuality, in 2020, with the help of HSTA, a bunch of us sat down and took a look at, okay, how do we give compression relief so that we retain our most experienced and terrific teachers who continue to have cap in their salary in spite of the years that they've been teaching. Unfortunately, COVID hit and we weren't able to revisit that issue. But with the additional amount of revenues, we have committed early on that we will address this issue. And we are very excited to announce that in the budget, we have allocated $90 million specifically for compression relief, and there's other things that we put in the budget. I think one of the interesting things is HSTA has always been advocating for this, but HSTA and the leadership have recognized that it's not really called compression relief. You can actually, the governor and the executive can do this through repricing. So that's the type of language that we're using this year. It should be repricing. And you don't need a new law. You don't actually need new legislation to do this. And the governor can do it right away. So we are making sure that money and funding is not a burden and a barrier for the executive and the governor to do this. So we're very excited that we have put in a significant amount to finally end compression relief or finally resolve compression problems.
And talking about students for just a moment, I mean, besides righting the wrongs to educators, how will students benefit from making these salary corrections?
I just want to say that this should be an unretirement party for many of the terrific teachers out there. And I want to give a special shout out to my dear friend Dana Kobayashi, Shishiro Kobayashi, and of course, Ashley Olsen. Ashley Olsen, if you're listening out there, I want to make sure that this is the year that we're going to make sure you don't retire. And Mr. Fritz out there, and of course, our lovely Lever Moore, who continues to be an advocate for HSTA. She should never retire, but in order to make sure that these experienced teachers continue to provide excellent education to teachers, we have to do our part in providing and rewarding teachers who continue to teach. And I think the way that it benefits students is the more experience and more classroom experience these teachers have, you're never gonna gain that through any type of schooling or books. You have to have the classroom experience.
Thank you. And is there anything else you want to say about the process of that proposal through the legislature this year?
Yes, I do. So Senate Bill 2819, which started out as a compression bill, what we did was instead of having a bill passed only because there was some disagreement between the executive branch and the legislature about the correct wording, and we didn't want there to be any dispute that it doesn't get done because of a specific wording. So there was general agreement that the way to do it is put in money in the budget as repricing. But the significant thing about Senate Bill 2819, we kept that alive to eliminate certain classification. And I think you and others have been impacted with the type of classification, so it eliminates certain classification to allow repricing to occur.
And like many of the legislative measures we're talking about today, this one has just been approved by the House Senate Conference Committee Friday and others in the last week. They're headed to final votes in the House and Senate tomorrow, and then they'll go to Governor Ige, who must sign them into law. Allow them to become law without his signature, or he can veto them, correct?
Correct. And so we're very hopeful that with the last conversation I had with the governor is committed to ending compression relief. So we will again have a conversation with the governor. I'm planning to invite some of the members of the HSTA leadership when I meet with the governor after session, after we pass this budget bill.
Well, assuming this compression money gets approved by the governor, when would it become available?
So that's a really good question. So if you remember last year during the 2021 session, we pre-funded some of the health fund benefits even before the negotiation closed. So we look at this as a similar approach by pre-funding things before it gets completely negotiated or completely resolved by the executive. So because we have pre-funded OPEB benefits, or not really OPEB benefits, the health fund benefits, while the negotiation got complete, we think this is the correct approach. So even if the negotiations, or even if the settlement happens after July 1, because this funding is put in effective July 1, it can be retroactively implemented back to July 1.
Great. And will teachers at DOE and charter schools benefit from this?
Yes, so one of the things that we were very mindful was that other negotiations, the administration specifically put into the, I think, the contract that any type of differentials or any type of cost items not be counted towards per pupil. When you do that, it really hurts the charter schools. So one of the things that we did in this budget is to allocate a separate line item under the charter school funding for a specific line item, both for differentials, cost items, and repricing.
And even though the funds would become available July 1st, HSTA knows that the Department of Education will have to work out the details of implementing those salary adjustments. So it'd be some months after that when veteran teachers start seeing those larger paychecks. We'll be sure to keep everyone updated on how that process is going. And there's also language in the compression bill that would remove the Class 7 salary cap. That would allow more salary increases to be negotiated during collective bargaining and to incentivize veteran teachers to take professional development courses to reclassify. Please talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the Senate Bill 2819 removes the classification to allow repricing to be negotiated immediately. And we're hoping that tomorrow, after we pass this, the budget bill of both the House and the Senate, and it gets enrolled to the governor, that we're hopeful that the governor will not only sign the budget bill, but he will ensure that the items in the budget, including compression relief, including differential and professional development, will be instituted this year.
Thank you, Sylvia, and all lawmakers for taking an important step to give experienced teachers an incentive to continue teaching and stay in the classrooms. Because we know many veteran educators whose financial planners were telling them it was time to retire and wasn't worth continuing to teach because their salaries were just so low. I know that will help us retain more teachers whose experience will help our students succeed and thrive. Another important proposal we prioritized this year funds various teacher differentials to help address labor shortages in the areas of special education, hard-to-staff geographic locations, and Hawaiian language immersion programs. About 4,000 public school educators receive the shortage differentials, which range from $3,000 to $10,000 a year. Why was this a priority for lawmakers?
So based on the study by both the Department of Education and HSCA, differentials work. Differentials in the area of Hawaiian medium and immersion schools, special needs, and also hard to fill areas, it really helped to retain some of these teachers to continue to teach in these fields. Because of that, what was significantly different this year as opposed to in the past is because we put it into the budget as opposed to in the bill. I think that was one of the benefit of putting it into the budget, was we made this permanent. So we made it so that it's recurring every year, as opposed to the DOE or HSTA or advocates coming in to request this funding year by year. And that's how it's been approached year by year. And I think what we have done this year is, whether it's differentials or whether it's salary compression, we made sure that it was a recurring expense so we don't have to deal with it again and again on a yearly basis.
Thank you. And what did the legislature do to make these shortage differentials continue with the charter schools included?
So in addition to the compression relief, we specifically put a line item again under the charter school budget, and we also made that permanent as well, so that it's not just this year, they can continue to get the benefit of differentials for the future years as well.
And on to another topic of interest to teachers. During last year's contract negotiations, the 21 hours of job-embedded professional development were removed due to budget cuts, resulting in a 1.5% pay reduction for teachers. Lawmakers took action to restore those hours, providing teachers the chance to hone their skills while being compensated for conducting work activities outside of regular working hours. Can you tell us what you did there to restore this PD money?
Right. So for the professional development funding, we also put that into the budget as additional cost items. So if you can imagine, the compression relief plus differentials plus professional development resulted in about 100, I would say about 150 plus million for this year and ongoing year. That's very exciting news, and we don't want money to be a barrier in keeping good teachers in the classroom.
And why was it important to restore these funds?
So professional development is something that has been negotiated in the past. According to the testimony for Budget and Finance, they were interested in continuing to have this item to be negotiated, and they said it was just a matter of funding. So we wanted to take that argument away and say, okay, then if that's the case, then we're going to give you the money so you can negotiate it and put it into the contract. I think that was a very important signal by the legislature.
And there are a bunch of other legislative proposals directly relating to schools that we still need to talk about. But can we shift for a moment to an important development on Hawaii's minimum wage, which hasn't gone up in 4 years? Just Friday, lawmakers agreed to increase the state's $10.10 an hour minimum wage incrementally to $12 per hour beginning October 1st, $14 per hour beginning in 2024, $16 per hour in 2026, and $18 per hour in 2028. There were a number of proposals and counter proposals about the minimum wage. Can you tell us how you folks came to an agreement on these amounts and why?
Yeah, prior to the pandemic in 2020, there was an agreement by both the House and the Senate and the governor to raise the minimum wage. Clearly, the last 2 years during the pandemic, it has been really hard to come to some type of an agreement on this issue and other really important issues. So this year, we're really happy that we reached an agreement between the House and the Senate. So as Lisa mentioned, the minimum wage will increase from $10.10 to $12 this year in October. So individuals making minimum wage this year will see an automatic increase going to $12 come October, $14 in 2024, and an additional $2 increase in 2026, and additional $2 increase in 2028. What was also significant about this bill is we have this credit called Earned Income Tax Credit, which really helped the working class. And that tax credit amounts to about $50 million, but we felt that it was really important for us to make that a refundable tax credit. Many of the low-income families, when a tax credit is non-refundable, they're not paying enough taxes to collect back the full amount that they deserve in credit. So what we have done is making it not only not refundable, but we made this permanent. I think the minimum wage coupled with EITC will significantly help our working class.
And I know so many folks who earn the minimum wage and struggle to make ends meet, including the students we teach, their parents, and many of our kupuna. They'll be relieved to know that they'll be getting a raise of almost $2 an hour coming up in October. Okay, back to proposals that directly affect educators in schools now. You introduced a bill that called on the state to acquire land in Eva Beach and build affordable housing specifically for teachers. Can you tell us about that proposal, please?
It's really exciting that we are now shifting discussion to building affordable housing for teachers. I mean, I think several decades ago, we had teacher housing. You know, you remember teacher housing in Waianae, you had teacher housing in other areas. We don't know why it stopped, but it is time for us to reinvest and build teacher housing. At least when we build teacher housing, you know, we are housing the very individuals that really need housing. So for instance, our workforce and our individuals who are committed to living here. I think it really is a problem when 50% of sales on Maui and 50% of sales on the Big Island continue to be sold to out-of-state residents. And so at least we know if we're building teacher housing, it will go to local families and it will go to people who will commit to working here. Unfortunately, the EVA teacher housing bill did not pass because I think there were some language that was difficult for the developer, but the developer is still committed to looking at building teacher housing in EVA. The other area that we have also looked at was in Nanakuli. We actually, along with Senator Kidani, we visited the Nanakuli high school, middle and high school, and in the back of the school, there was a large plot of land that could potentially be used for teacher housing. So this is an exciting continued discussion, and I think the legislature in the future will look at developing teacher housing throughout the state.
Another proposal appropriates $200 million to the School Facilities Authority to construct more preschool facilities across the state. The money will also pay for the renovation, improvement, and expansion of existing public school facilities to increase pre-kindergarten student capacity. Can you talk about what these funds will do and why it's important?
In 2020, the legislature passed a law saying that all 3 and 4-year-olds would have access to early learning. About 50% of our 3 and 4-year-olds are not able to go to preschools because either they cannot afford it or there's no access. Now, because we have the increased amount of revenues, one of the things that we wanted to do was put in a significant amount to build out more preschools. I think there are schools out there, whether it's in Waianae or whether it's in town or especially on the neighbor island, if we can build more preschools and we can build more 3 and 4-year-old preschools, I think that will really lead to better learning outcomes. That's why I think HSTA and the teachers and the many of the educators fought for universal preschools, and this is a huge step forward in building out many of the needed preschools throughout the state. So we're very excited about this funding.
Great. Both houses have already approved and sent to the governor a proposal to guarantee freedom of the press to student journalists. What would that proposal do?
So we already passed the protection for student journalists. This is a really important issue, and a lot of credit goes to McKinley High School and Ms. Kaneshiro and Shane Kaneshiro and others. And I think Waipahu High School students were really involved with this issue as well. We have to ensure that student journalists are protected from certain influence, whether it's by the administration or by others, and not be afraid to publish things without being censored and without being afraid to publish and speak their mind. This is part of civic activism, and I think this has been a long time coming, and we're very excited that this already has passed both the House and the Senate and is waiting for the governor to approve. So very important bill.
And why was this freedom of the press law needed?
The freedom of press is needed because just as the First Amendment affords freedom of press for adults, we have to make sure that our student journalists understand that, hey, in order for them to be a good, whether it's journalist or editor or in journalistic capacity, we want them to have real life experience of what this is about. So I think it's a very important bill, and it's very exciting that many of the students came back and pushed for this bill, and we just love it when students engage and be involved in civic activism.
Well, and it's especially important because the Department of Education considers student voice to be one of its major priorities. Thank you. Another bill that's up for a final vote of both houses this week establishes within the Department of Education a workforce readiness program. And that would provide opportunities for students to earn associate degrees, workforce development diplomas, pre-apprenticeship certificates, and other industry recognized certificates. Please tell us about the purpose of this program.
So as some of you folks know, many of the schools already have and take advantage of the early college program where high school students can earn college degrees at the same time they're going for an associate degree. So you can actually graduate from high school with an associate degree. We had many success stories of high school students having this dual track. That is not enough, because it's not enough that you get a degree. We need to make sure that these students are in the workforce pathway, and this provides a real opportunity to do the one step further for them to have certification or career ready. This is actually in partnership with what we passed in the budget as well. We put in $3.6 million into the budget to allow 265 student interns to have have an opportunity to work within state government. There are so many interesting jobs within state government, whether it's archaeology, whether it's in invasive species, or whether it's in agriculture. There's so many opportunities, and every year hundreds and hundreds of vacant positions go unfilled. And I think one of the things that we need to do is ensure and get students excited about what are the different possible jobs out there, and what are some of the areas that they would be interested in. So this bill, the workforce readiness program, coupled with the student internship program, coupled with early college, will go a long way to give students and teachers different alternative and pathway about the various possibilities of career pathways out there.
Great. And next, let's talk about something that's going to affect nearly everyone who's watching this live stream, tax rebates. On Friday, lawmakers from both houses agreed to approve $300 tax refunds for taxpayers who earn less than $100,000 a year, and $100 rebates for those who earn more than $100K. Why did you folks decide on making these refunds?
In the beginning of session, the governor pushed for a bill to allow for a $100 rebate for all taxpayers. We felt that in itself was not enough, because the individuals making less than $100,000 actually need more assistance, as opposed to people making over $100,000. Towards the end of session, we realized we had enough revenues for us to be able to provide additional assistance for individuals making $100,000 or less. This, coupled with EITC, would potentially provide lower income individuals potentially $1,600 in additional tax relief for this year. The interesting thing about the tax rebate bill is that you don't have to wait till next year. This is actually effective this year. So as soon as you file your taxes and the governor signs this bill, you could see a check coming sometime within this year. So make sure you file your taxes, and as soon as you file your taxes and the governor signed this bill, we will be working with the administration to get those checks out to individuals.
And do you happen to know, for people who use direct deposit, would they get direct deposit refunds instead of checks?
So that's the answer. I probably don't know, only because I think it depends on whether Department of Taxation will be able to do that through direct deposit.
Okay, well, thank you. It was a selfish question because, of course, I file by direct deposit. So there you go. How is it that there's enough money in the budget to fund these rebates?
It's really interesting that 2 years ago we were talking about a $3 billion budget deficit, and we're looking at cutting all kinds of programs, including things with sex assault victims and tuberculosis treatment. We were looking at all kinds of devastating cuts, even in education and the University of Hawaii. And fortunately, with the federal relief and some of the economic activities, we're in a significantly better position. I think the tax refund bill is about $250 million. That is just a small portion of many of the bills we're passing this year, and we're just so fortunate that we're able to take care of many needs. I think Governor Wahe called this a $1 billion banner year for Native Hawaiians, only because not only the $600 million that we set aside for DHHL, but we also settled the Kalima case for $300 million. We also provided OHA, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, $64 million. I think when given this opportunity to fix some of the lingering problems, we are just so thankful that we were able to take care of the needs in education, the fact that we're able to set aside 150 plus every year to do compression relief, differentials, professional development, and other many needed things in education. I'm just so thankful that we are in this economic upswing to provide many of the things that we weren't able to do in the past.
Well, one proposal that I know a lot of educators, students, and parents will be interested in is more money for air conditioning classrooms. Lawmakers are setting aside millions for that. Can you tell us more, like how much money and who's going to get it?
In the budget, we set aside amounts for air conditioning and heat abatement, and those are specifically for different schools. Several years ago, we allotted $100 million to take care of many of the AC projects. What we learned from that was that the $100 million sometimes was not correctly used because there were a significant number of schools that didn't have electrical wiring, that didn't have the right type of things, and heat abatement couldn't go towards, sometimes you purchasing standalone fans or different type of paint. I think what we have learned is we cannot just allot money and hoping that that's going to lead to results. So what we did this year is, depending on the schools, we allotted funds for specific projects. But in addition to that, in one of the bills, we're allotting $10 million to look at incidental costs. So it may not be directly AC, or it may not be directly heat abatement, but there may have to be some renovation, or they may have to change the plug. So we wanted to make sure that we take care of incidental costs. So that's what one of the bills is.
And this next bill would make Hawaii the 6th state in the country to offer free menstrual products to all public and charter school students. Why is this proposal important?
This has been one of the most inspiring sessions when it dealt with menstrual equity. About 3 years ago, I think Miss Millie, Sarah Millie Laughlin, came with some of the students from Ilima Middle School to testify in front of the finance committee, and then we still had a picture of that when they came by. At that point in time, it was one of the, it didn't pass, and so we continued that discussion. And this year, I think between Miss Millie's class and of the Ma'i movement, Miss Nikki and others, they brought a lot of students. I think about 30 or 40 students came to testify in front of finance. And for legislators to hear this from 8th graders and 7th graders about their personal experiences, and for them to be so brave and courageous to tell their stories was just so heartwarming and inspiring for many of the legislators. So even if, money-wise, or even if issue-wise, this may seem not like a big deal, but it was a huge deal for many of the legislators listening to those students. And we just wanted to thank many of the advocates who kept fighting and who kept coming and testifying each and every time. These students came so many times to the legislature to testify all throughout the way. And I think that's what teachers do. They inspire kids to take an issue, not just take an issue, but be passionate about it, to be able to be brave enough to share their story, to be sympathetic and empathetic, because it wasn't just girls coming forward, it was boys and kids who graduated, who wanted to share their story in their middle school years. It was really touching for them to go and surround themselves and be energized. And it was really, if there was anything that was really outstanding and stood out, it was this bill, and it was really heartwarming.
Yeah, we are proud of our colleague Sarah Milianta Laughlin, who's a teacher at Ilima Intermediate, and we call her Millie affectionately. She's been advocating along with her students for this proposal for years, as you mentioned. I know the proposal started with $100 million in funding, but you folks doubled that. Oh, I'm sorry? $1 million. Sorry, as a woman, I was trying to make it even more.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. The proposal started with $1 million in funding, but you doubled it to $2 million. Can you tell us why?
When we looked at, initially, Department of Education was not in support. We're very happy that they came around and is in support of this bill. But when we looked at the funding needs, we thought the $1 million was not enough to make sure that we have menstrual products in all the schools. So that's why we didn't want money to be a barrier to access. So we wanted to make sure that this get in the budget. We passed, it's an unusual situation because this was a rare time where we put money into the budget, and the reason why we put money into the budget. To those people who are really akamai about the budget, we put it in the budget because it's recurring, because we don't want it to be a one-time thing. But the second thing that we did was even if it's in the budget, we passed the bill because we needed the bill to mandate the Department of Education, not just in regular education, but also in charter school as well, just so that there's a mandate to ensure that period products are accessible throughout the school. So this was really important for both cases.
And we knew things were looking good this year for menstrual equity when Senate President Ron Kochi talked about the proposal in his opening day speech. We thank all lawmakers for supporting it. And a couple more proposals here before we get to some questions. There's a bill that creates a pilot school subsidy, supply subsidy program for students at so-called Title I schools, or those where a significant portion of their students live at or below the poverty line. Sylvia, can you tell us more about the subsidy pilot project?
This actually started out as a subsidy pilot project for, I think, one school. And so we thought, okay, well, instead of taking care of one school, we should actually think about what is the need for the entire school system. And we got an amount that what we really needed was around $800,000. I don't know if $800,000 is enough for the entire school system, but that's the number we got, and at least we will know if the Department of Education ends up spending everything, then we will know whether that was enough. But sometimes I question whether that amount is a little bit too low, but we didn't want it to be a pilot when many of the teachers spend out of pocket. And many of the teachers use their own money to pay for either school supplies, or a lot of kids go without sometimes pencils or notebooks. So we didn't want money to be a barrier in education. So we wanted to make sure that we put in the $800,000, not as a pilot, but to take care of the entire state.
Well, as a teacher who's taught at a Title I school and a parent whose children go to a Title I school, I do appreciate that. There's an appropriation for emergency lead abatement in public schools. What's the latest on that proposal?
We passed the emergency appropriation to take care of lead abatement. It was $1.8 million, but that's not all. So this is only the schools that Department of Health and Department of Education identified. There are a lot of other schools that we still need to do something about, and we were shocking that a lot of these schools were on Maui, Lisa. So make sure, when you drink the water at schools, be careful. And a lot of the problems were on Maui and the Big Island. This only takes care of a portion of it. Department of Education and Department of Health have committed to us to giving us a new estimate to take care of rest of the problem. This only takes care of the immediate needs. What we still need to do is change the piping and change some of the fixtures, so that will come in the future legislation as well.
Well, on behalf of teachers, students, and parents, thank you and all the lawmakers for crafting a budget that really supports them in many areas this year. We really appreciate it, and we're going to get to some questions now. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Corey Harvey, a third grade teacher at Kipapa Elementary and member of HSTA's Government Relations Committee, to ask the questions we've received online. Corey?
First I want to thank you again for being here today and taking the time to answer questions from our teacher members. So this question is from a member from Maui. And please excuse if some of these questions were answered earlier. We have new listeners. When will the compression pay begin? Will it be this upcoming school year? Or when do you anticipate it coming into effect?
We put the compression relief, differentials, and professional development money starting July 1 of this year. So as soon as the governor negotiates and makes it a reality, the governor can actually retroactively reward the amounts back to July 1. So we are hopeful as soon as we pass the budget, the governor will act and get together with HSTA leadership to make this a reality.
Thank you. This question comes from a member from Windward chapter. The question is, I heard that they are considering adding an additional class 8, to the pay scale and bringing back our 21 hours of PD that were taken away from us. When can I expect for those to come into effect?
Yeah, so again, similar response, because we put professional development funding into the budget effective July 1, 2022, we are hopeful that as soon as the budget bill is signed, and we are passing the budget bill tomorrow, and it will be going up to the governor's office, and we're hoping that he quickly sign and activate professional development. As far as the classification, we actually passed a bill, I think Senate Bill 2819, which gets rid of the classification component so that the classification doesn't become a barrier to repricing and to deal with compression relief.
Thank you. This question comes from a member from the Leeward chapter. Salary compression doesn't help everyone, especially teachers with 5 years or less. We need across-the-board increases. Why aren't federal pandemic funds, the ESSER funds, being used to pay teachers to offset inflation?
I'll take that one.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so actually it is on the Board of Education and the Department of Education to be putting those funds into their budget. And the Board of Education had an opportunity at a couple of points, including in December, to put ESSER funds specifically for things like permanent salary increases or providing a bonus pay for teachers. And they did not do it, even though our U.S. Secretary of Education has given very good and specific instructions about how the money could be used for that. And so it is unfortunate that it hasn't been provided in that way.
Thank you, Lisa. This question comes from a Leeward chapter member who is a military spouse, and her question is, will years of service from other states count?
Oh, okay. I can take that one as well.
Thank you.
So it's not just the military spouses, but anyone who's come into the state of Hawaii with previous teaching experience may be disappointed to find that for the moment, only up to 6 years of service would count. However, the department has indicated recently that that's a very important thing for them to tackle. And so we may be seeing some movement on that from the department soon.
Okay, we look forward to that. Has a tax credit, this question comes from Maui. Has a tax credit or housing allowance ever been discussed as an option to help teachers and civil servants like police, firefighters, and healthcare workers who our community benefits from the most as a way to fight the rising cost of living?
That's a really good question, and that's why I think we are looking at teacher housing. So teacher housing at a lower rental cost, and we discussed that this year. That will be continuously discussed in the future as well. But we are looking at ways to relieve some of the high cost of living, especially for our essential workers like teachers and other essential workers. So that's a really good question, and we will definitely continue to look at that as well.
Thank you. This one comes from Honolulu. With other unions negotiating raises already, what is the status of our contract negotiations?
Thank you. That falls on me. It's actually very timely as a question because in the next couple of days, our HSTA president, Osatui, will be sending out a message to members. And so you should be looking for that and checking your emails. If you do not get emails from Hawaii State Teachers Association, make sure that you send an email to info@hsta.org to get yourself signed up for those.
Thank you. This next one is more of a comment from a member in Kauai that maybe many of us might relate to. Her comment is, I'm a single parent, 30-year veteran of the DOE. I can barely afford to live here anymore. So fixing the compression situation should be our biggest priority. So just taking a moment to let that one sink in, because I think many of us feel that way.
Yeah. And I think that's why we made it a priority, and we made sure that when we have an opportunity because of revenue increases, we wanted to make sure that we take care of this problem. I know it's been a long-standing issue that we've been discussing, and we're just happy that we were able to put into the budget, not just this year, but we embedded it into the budget as a recurring item. So we are very hopeful that the governor will not just sign the budget, but make this a reality for many of the teachers who are contemplating retirement because their salaries are capped and their salaries are compressed. And as you know, I listed a bunch of names, and I want to make sure that this is actually a retirement party for all the teachers out there as soon as the governor makes this a reality.
And Corey, if I could tack on to that for just one moment, I think that some teachers don't even realize that they fall into this problem, because anyone who's been in the Department of Education for more than 2 years and is not at the top of the salary schedule is affected by compression, including myself. And even though I would only benefit a movement of one step, I certainly appreciate anything that can be done. So thank you.
Yay, thank you. This question, so that's for you, member in Kauai. I hope you heard that. This one comes from Maui. This is about EL. EL teachers teach students, and they also need to complete extensive amounts of district, state mandated paperwork all throughout the year, and they don't get incentive pay like SPED teachers do. We also serve EL students that are also classified as SPED. They have to attend IEP meetings. And finally, currently there are very few teachers that are certified in EL. The question is, why aren't we also receiving the differentials?
And thank you. English learner is the designation for EL, and sometimes it's been called ELL, English language learner. But it is something that HSTA is endeavoring to have included as a shortage area so that it might become eligible for differential pay as well, even though that might not be something that happens right away. But it is something that's on our agenda.
This question comes from Molokai, and if you're a new listener, here it is again. When will the compression fix be established, and for how long, and is this a one-time deal?
Thank you for that question. It's not a one-time budgetary item, only because we put it into the budget and we made it recurring. So this is something that will continue to be in the budget year after year unless somebody takes it out. Hopefully not. And then so what we're trying to do is, as soon as the budget is passed, and the budget includes professional development, it also includes compression relief and also differential. And once the budget is passed, we're hopeful that the governor will sign it and then make all those things a reality. That the effective date of those three items would be July 1. So even if the negotiations and agreement happens after July 1, you can actually retroactively make those benefits be effective July 1.
Thank you. This question comes from a member in Kona. How will you help to stabilize and ensure a designated funding source for education with the use of property tax or a surcharge the way other states utilize such things, so that the $40 million home that's 3 miles away from our public school will contribute to the school system?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. As we were discussing, especially on the Big Island, half the properties sold on the Big Island are going to non-residents. And as you can imagine, a lot of these are investment properties, and that will increase the cost of housing for everyone. What we have advocated in the past, and HSTA has also advocated, is setting aside a portion of the property tax to be going for educational needs. 49 other states have property tax supporting education. Hawaii is the only one that does not support education through property tax, and all the counties have fought vigorously. And as you know, the counties have sued on this issue as well. And it is unfortunate, but I think it is a conversation that we need to have with our county officials as well, and we need to ask them if they want to put education as something that they want to support, and it's a really worthy conversation. The other thing that we need to think about is in 2030, the rail tax will expire. So one of the things that we need to engage is whether instead of allowing the 0.5% to expire in 2030, whether we should have that discussion about making the 0.5% permanent and having that dedicated for educational uses as well.
Okay, we look forward to that. This question comes from a member in Maui, and he begins with, mahalo, thank you for getting the money to put teachers to put their proper salary, put them into the proper salary step, continue the differentials, providing money for the 21 hours. My VP has shared that Maui County is facing a 300 teacher shortage crisis next year. And currently we have a sub shortage all year this year. Are there any plans, or what plans are in place to address these serious shortages so our students and faculty do not suffer next year?
Wow, that's really terrible to hear. And it's year after year, we see teacher shortage in the number of, every year there's like hundreds of vacancy, and we continue to struggle with teacher shortages. We're hopeful that with some of the compression relief and pay differential, we can retain some of the teachers who are thinking of retiring, but that's clearly not enough. What we're hoping is the state offers Promise program for community colleges. We want to expand that to the four-year colleges, and maybe have a pathway to encourage young people to become teachers. But we can't just encourage young people to become teachers if we don't pay them the salaries to make a living here. And I think adjusting the salaries will make a huge difference in attracting more young people to go into the teaching profession.
I also hope so, and I'm thinking about colleagues in my school that are young and thinking about what they want to do with their future.
And also, if I may add on to that, I know that some teachers are taking it into their own hands, and we actually have an education pathway at Maui High School. So the teacher, Rondi Arquero, and that has encouraged some of her best students to go ahead and take the substitute teacher course so that they can start immediately while they're still at community college locally or whatever, to help out and be qualified subs that the students know and trust.
Yeah. In fact, I think this year in the either in the budget or in the bills, we have a Grow Your Own project, which encourages students to become teachers and go back into the community where they were born and raised. So this is a Grow Your Own program that provides incentives.
Thank you. This question comes from a member in Maui. Will the differential still be in place in the 22-23 school year and beyond?
Yes, because we put the differentials and compression relief and the 21-hour professional development into the budget, it's recurring. And even if somehow the negotiations are delayed, this will be in place not just for this year but future years as well. A lot of questions from Maui.
Yes, I noticed that. Well, we're quite a chatty bunch.
No, it must be because they are all watching you, Lisa.
Oh dear, okay.
Well, this one comes from Hilo.
Okay.
And this member's question is, if teacher pay across the board is increased, will SPED teachers still get the SPED $10,000 stipend in addition to the pay increase for all teachers, including SPED teachers?
The answer is yes. The special special education teacher differential will happen regardless of whether HSTA negotiates a regular salary increase amount. So that is on top of whatever salary adjustment or collective bargaining agreement that is reached between HSTA and the executive branch.
To be clear, $10,000 on top of whatever is negotiated.
Correct.
Okay, correct. Okay. This one comes from Kona. When do you think the teacher pay budget funds will pass?
Tomorrow, the budget is scheduled to be passed by both the House and the Senate. It will be the first thing that both the House and the Senate will take up. We are going in at 9. I'm not clearly sure what time the Senate will be going in. They're going to be going in at 10. So it's the first bill that we will be passing tomorrow. So we are very excited about passing this budget and sending it to the governor for his signature and action.
Thank you. This one comes from a member from the Windward chapter. If the cap of class 7 is taken away, do we still need 15 credits to move to the next class?
That's probably something that I could answer. Is we don't have exactly those items negotiated yet, but I would expect that if the department is willing to move us to include a class 8 or something beyond, that they would want us to have the professional development to move just like we have for others. So that's why I'm excited for it, because I actually happen to be at class 7. Are you at class 7 as well, Corey?
I am.
Yes.
I am.
Okay. And so I want to remind our teachers that they need to be looking into whether they've been turning in their credits, including from the 21 hours we used to have, to make sure that you have those ready to go when this comes out. So hopefully that will be something that we'll be able to negotiate soon.
Because some teachers have credits sitting.
Yes. Some of us don't always turn our paperwork in as quickly as we should.
This is really complicated area. You guys are such experts in these step movements.
We have to do it because we have to help each other. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you, Lisa. This question comes from Lanai. Will the teachers find out if salary compression passes and gets funded by the beginning of next school year, which would be in August? This member says, this bill will determine if I stick around longer or retire.
We really don't want you to retire, Lanai, out there, because we need every teacher in Lanai. When I took the finance committee to Lanai to visit the school, we were shocked to learn how many teachers and how many people turn over every year. And we had that recent issue with Lanai teacher housing that we were able to clear up, and DOE said, whoops, that was a mistake. And I can't believe that they actually sent eviction notices to teachers out there. That was really heartbreaking, but they corrected that as well. We will be passing the budget bill tomorrow, and we are hopeful that the governor signs the budget bill and then act on the 3 measures or the 3 items right away. And we will be there along with HSTA leadership to urge the governor to act quickly, just to make sure that you don't retire.
So yes, please. We need our veteran teachers. That kind of leads into the next question. We're moving into questions that are from Facebook, or that we're pulling from. And this question is, when is the governor going to make the decision about the compression funding?
So the governor's deadline is after we pass the budget, after we pass the bill, he has 45 days to review. I think that pushes us around end of June. So he has to either let the legislature know and the public know towards the end of June. I could be getting the dates somewhat wrong, but it's around that time that he has to give notice that he will line item veto or veto a bill. So we will have pretty good notice in about, I would say, a month and a half, whether there's a problem or not.
Thank you. Okay, fingers crossed for that one.
Yeah.
I tuned in late. This is from a member. I tuned in late. Can you recap what's happening with compression? One more time, Sylvia.
So as we discussed, thanks for tuning in. I know a lot of you folks are probably working and you're gonna tune in late. So thanks for tuning in. Both Corey and Lisa really appreciate you folks just listening in today. The compression relief portion and differential and professional development monies in the amount of about $150 million have been placed into the budget, and we will be passing the budget tomorrow. And when the budget is passed, the governor will have an opportunity to sign that bill, and after he signs the bill, we are allowing the governor to come to an agreement with HSTA to make all these things a reality this year.
So this one is from Ashley Olson.
Hey, Ashley.
Thanks for tuning in, Ashley. And her question is, Representative Luke, how does early September sound for an unretirement party?
Yeah. I think that should be our goal. September should be the unretirement Ashley Olson party. So that's going to put a lot of pressure. I'm going to be calling OSA right after this to make sure that as soon as the budget bill is passed, we're going to march up to the governor's office and say, hey, you know what? There is Ashley. We got to make sure that Ashley and the teacher from Lanai from retiring. So we have to get this done before September, right?
Hopefully. Hopefully. Yeah. Okay, so we have our last question of tonight. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Representative Sylvia Luke, why should teachers in this state support you for Lieutenant Governor?
Well, thank you so much for that question. The reason why I wanted to run for Lieutenant Governor is because I can be that bridge between the governor's office and the legislature. I have a lot of good relationship with the legislators, including many of the champions in education like Michelle Kidani and others. And I'm hoping that when there is some type of an issue that really needs my attention, I can go and work between the governor and the legislators to make it work. And a lot of times, between legislators and governor, they may not be really knowledgeable about many of the issues. And I'm hoping that I can be a champion and a fighter for all of you folks out there. So thank you for inviting me, Corey and Lisa, for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And when you come to Maui for Ashley's party, I know where she lives. I'll pick you up at the airport and drive you right over there. Our time's come to a close, though, so thank you so much for joining us today. Mahalo to Corey Harvey for sifting through our questions, and a heartfelt thank you to Representative Sylvia Luke for all you and your colleagues have done to support public and charter school educators and the students they teach. And finally, we appreciate every teacher throughout the state. Remember, your gift this week, check for it in your box at school. And thank you for everything you do for our keiki. Aloha.